All right. What's up?
What's going on?
How's it going?
Same old, same old.
We're back in the saddle, back in the chairs. I think this is our second time recording since we got the new office.
Mm-hmm.
Get up. Yeah.
I like it over here.
It's different, but it's good. It's good.
We got
Maybe
more
a little
space to set up, I think.
Yeah. So today we have our good friend, our new friend, some of our new friends, Vince. What's
Hello.
up, Vince?
How you doing? How you guys doing today? Thank you for having me, by the way.
Thank you for coming.
I appreciate
You
it.
pull the mic just a little bit closer to you.
You got it.
There you go.
Here we go. I want to make
That
sure I can
mic
see
about
everybody.
a fist from your face.
I'm used to eating the mic when I used to sing
Yeah.
live. So,
Yeah.
pull the Elvis. Oh.
I don't know if I'd make that motion again.
No, I would say make that motion at least a few more times. So just to, I don't know, be transparent, Vince, you are the long-term boyfriend of our good friend and coworker and rad program teammate / community educator, Tessa Moody.
Yeah, she was on not that long ago.
Yes, she was. And she's rocking the switcher today behind the cameras. Thank you, Tess.
Yes,
So-
I don't have to push buttons and talk at the same time.
Yes, complicates things, that's for sure. So introduce yourself a little bit. Who are you? Where are you from?
My name is Vincent. I'm from South Florida, born and raised in Boca Raton. I spent most of my entire life in South Florida. I spent a few months in Sarasota on the other coast of Florida, but basically stayed around here, my home base. I went to art school. I went to arts high school, went to college. I had to leave the arts college, came back to Boca, worked for FedEx for about 14 years. Fuck that place. They did not give me the room that I needed and the support that I needed. So I worked there for a long-ass time. I played in the South Florida music scene for a few years, played in a band, played in a couple other projects that didn't really get off the ground, and had a lot of times going to shows and playing shows and doing drugs here and there, and it's mostly smoking a ton of weed. I've seen a few of the episodes that y'all have done, and like there's some people with some pretty heavy stories, and I don't know that I'll be able to fully live up to it in terms of like that wow factor of like, man, you went through something. But I think I have some stories to offer in terms of having friends who've gone through this kind of stuff, and myself having a very long-term marijuana addiction, I would call it at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like what we look to do on this show, you know? Like, yeah, there's some of us have like some, I don't know, really chaotic history with substance use and stuff. I wouldn't say that one is less important to talk about than the other, mostly because like the whole point of us having these conversations is to like show the wide array of experiences, and like it doesn't go one way or another. It happens differently for different people, and what like problematic substance use looks like for somebody might look very different for another, but that doesn't make it any more or less problematic for the individual.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's probably been my personal thing with like feeling like, well, it's not a big problem, right? It's like, it's just weed. It's not like something more like a heavy narcotic that you have a physiological addiction to. So I've always felt like, I don't know, it's not that big of a problem. And so I'll ignore it for about 15, 16 years. And so that's what I did. And it's been about, I don't know, like 7 weeks, close to 2 months that I've stopped smoking weed, switched to Delta 8 flower, which is like, I don't know, it's basically nothing, but it does something for that like routine thing of like just sit by the bong all the time when I'm at home and just sort of stay by that. I don't know, I've used it to like help my appetite. I'm talking about marijuana to help my appetite, to help me in social situations. I've used it to help me with like performance anxiety, with like playing music and stuff. I've used it to help me with like, I don't know, name any problem under the sun. I've got a headache. I should probably smoke some weed. My stomach hurts. I should smoke some weed. I'm bored is most of the biggest problem. Let me smoke some weed. And I don't know, it seems to be a short-term Band-Aid on the problem, but I also feel like really stunted in my growth. Like I'm 33 years old, and like I feel like human developmental wise, I'm still like in my mid 20s because so many of those years were just spent like staying in my hole and just doing that forever. So and it's felt really weird because I've had friends who've had like serious narcotic addictions and they've had to go to rehab and they've been on the street and, had to go to the hospital. I had a friend who passed away a few years back as a result of, addiction to opiates. So like, I've never felt that like, well, I don't have that street cred. Like, I don't know if I have much to offer in terms of that. But I think with smoking weed, like, there's a lot of ways that people take it, and socially and culturally, the way that people think about that as a drug is like, I don't know, there's a bad side to it. Like, there's definitely like a negative side. So that's what I feel like I have to offer today.
Yeah.
So do you think your use of marijuana was problematic?
Yes. I've probably for the first couple years, like it started out like at the end of high school, going into college, going to art school. And so it was like sort of a thing that a lot of people just did. But I had to leave school because my family couldn't afford it, and there's a lot of depression there. That was going to be like my life. That was like going to be what I wanted to do, and then I had to stop that and get a regular job. And so I was like, let me just like bury this feeling, and that seemed to make things okay. And it became a routine very quickly of like, this is just something that I do, and I'm afraid of what's going to happen to me if I just stop. And so I would say that's problematic. Like, you don't want to just continue to do something because you're afraid what will happen if you stop doing it.
Right.
So, yeah.
And I mean, in the sense that you say that you felt like it's in some ways stunted your like growth, not physically, but like, emotionally, mentally, psychologically, whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
And like, so two things. For one, like, I agree that so I think that it's a good thing that cannabis has become like less stigmatized.
Absolutely.
And like is a normalized.
And that's the thing.
Like,
it's like,
that
I didn't
should-
stop until a year and a half after I got my medical card, until it was like, I can just go to the weed store every day. I'm not waiting in a parking lot at 2 a.m. for some guy who I'm not even sure if I like him or trust him. It's a lot different. And I don't know if that had something to do with like, all right, now it's time to stop. Like, it's very easy to stop because it was very easy to access it. So maybe that's got something to do with it. And like, I do think that's good. People should have access to these drugs. Like, it hasn't changed my opinion on like, it's an important part of the human experience is to like alter your mind with different substances.
Right.
Like, we deserve that as people, sentient beings.
And it's so strange that like some old white dudes have the ability to like say like you cannot alter your mind in this way.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Dudes
Like
who have
that's
never
always
tried that.
fucking. That's like drug policy is strange because that's what it is. Like it's a ruling over your own consciousness.
Yeah,
But
that's a very weird, like, it's a spiritual thing, and it's like a cultural thing. It's like, there are drugs that are like central to certain societies. That's like, this is something that we do. And like,
Absolutely.
we have like caffeine and alcohol and tobacco that are like just kind of things that we do. But why are these other ones like on the list,
Right.
Because they're less controlled, I think.
Yeah.
Governmental wise, it's a control thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I've always felt like sort of that other in terms of like regular socially acceptable substance use, because I don't drink. Like, I've never really been a drinker. Like, I have a drink now and then, especially nowadays. Like, when we go out, I'll have like maybe 1 or 2 drinks, but that's never been a thing where I've always been like, all right, let's get through this, or let's make sure I can smoke weed in the parking lot because this is my only
Right.
way of enjoying myself.
Right.
And so I've felt very much like not a part of society in that way. It's like a very weird place to be.
Interesting. So I want to get back to that, but before, I don't know, that something that you said made me think about the way like people put out. You said that because of the way maybe society's view or like the general acceptance of cannabis has been, like you kind of, and in consideration of like your friends' experiences with problematic substance use, like you could minimize it enough to not view it as problematic long enough for what you said, like 15 years or something like that.
Yeah.
I think it just made me think of like how that goes with like people's trauma too. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
if the worst thing that's ever happened to you, like that's the worst thing that's ever happened to you, and like it may be nothing quote unquote, if you compare it to somebody else's trauma, that's like, you know, some really shitty event or numerous events or situations in their life that, you know, if you put value judgments on them, one could be seen as worse than the other, but it doesn't mean that one is any more impactful on one person than the other. You know, like the worst thing that's ever happened to you is the worst thing that's ever happened to you. And like you experience that trauma or that problematic substance use to the degree that you experience it. And that doesn't make it any less of a degree than somebody else in terms of like how it impacts you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes sense. That totally makes sense. Like having to deal with friends that are like, I've seen what you've gone through. I've never had to go to the hospital because I'm going through horrible withdrawals. You know, I've never had to go to rehab and been forced by like a court of law to be like, you need to go and do this thing because you've done so many bad things. Like I've sort of been able to fly under the radar in that way, like legally wise. And so I never had that point. But like looking back, it's like it's affected my relationships with family, with friends, romantic relationships, work-life balance, just like my view of the world, emotional development. Like there's so many things that like have sort of opened up in these past 2 months that very excited to see where life is going at this point, but also like, damn, like, and it was like, I spent a lot of good times, but like I wasted a lot of time just like sitting around smoking weed and doing nothing, you know?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And so, yeah, like that's something that there'll be a point in my life where it's okay to go back to maybe here and there. But I don't know. I kind of have like an addictive personality with certain substances that I've gotten used to integrating into my regular routine. Like caffeine is one. Like there was a period of drinking a 20-ounce Red Bull every day, sometimes twice a day, and then coupling with the 5-hour energy. And it's like, and it became a thing where I'm like, I'm not going to do a good job at work if I don't take this stuff.
Right.
And that's like a very problematic way to think, you know? And so sometimes you owe it to yourself to raw dog it through a day or two and just see how your body operates. But maybe it has something to do with like OCD, like tendencies that I've talked to my therapist about that are like, things need to line up the way that I think they should line up, or else like the world's going to come crashing down or something. And so marijuana became like very ingrained in that sort of routine of like, I'm going to go crazy, or I'm going to be bored, or I'm going to be sad if I don't do this. But looking back, it probably made me a lot more sad than I thought. So,
yeah. I mean, I don't know. I've definitely like smoked weed problematically. Like in my life, I've talked about it on this podcast. Like I've smoked weed like from the time I've woken up to the time I go to bed. And like, not just that, but like my overall focus throughout my day-to-day was like weed. Like, when am I going to smoke again? Am I running out? How much do I have?
Exactly.
Like,
it's always in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
You're thinking like, well, we're going to be going here. Like,
right.
What's the parking lot situation?
Right.
Like,
Let me get my mind right before I go do this.
I've totally treated weed like very similarly to how I treated opiates or
For sure.
other substances I've had problematic use with. But I think a lot of that like is influenced by like the situation, at least for me, that I was in my life. And like, it was a lot easier for me to fall into that when I didn't feel like I was fulfilled in whatever else I was doing. I don't know, the access thing too.
Right.
Like,
what is it about not being able to get to something that makes you want it more?
Yeah,
you know,
dude.
like what is it about that? With us
Forbidden
as people?
fruit syndrome, yeah.
yeah,
It's
like
fucked up.
I've seen it in myself and in so many people.
Yeah.
Like that goes out the window. That part of like every day is concentrating on like, what is my dude gonna like have enough for me to re-up?
Just go
and,
AWOL.
like, yeah, I don't have to worry about like I can get it. Like I can get a fucking pack of gum or a bottle of water. So it's not. It kind of becomes equivalent. Like I might chew a piece of gum every day, but I'm not gonna think about that pack of gum.
Right.
You know.
And there was probably a time in my life where I was like, this is thrilling. This is like, oh, let's go and meet some weird person in the middle of, you know, an alleyway or a parking lot or some random, like literally like just like a drug den sort of house where it's like he's dealing blues, he's dealing whatever, he's dealing coke, and then what we're here for some weed. And it's like, oh, this is exciting. You get to meet new and exciting people, and there comes a time where you're like, this is no longer fun, but I guess it's just something that is a part of life, you know? And so got used to that pretty quickly. It stopped being fun in that way, but experimenting with other drugs was fun, and sort of teetering that line with like, is this something I should be taking every day? And luckily having that observational experience from friends and loved ones that have like gone through it, and like definitely like living in a toxic household, like emotionally, verbally abusive household will make you just want to like shut things out.
For
just
sure.
want to stay in your little hole and do your thing. So like, I feel like there's been a few contributing factors in that way over the years that have led me to where I was. But part of it is like, yeah, you're just like not in an environment where you want to be. And so you're like, what's the easiest and usually cheapest way to do that is to alter in here and just do something to numb the senses. So, but definitely see the value in like just recreational drug use in general, you know, and some people don't have a problem with it. And I think that's beautiful. But I don't know if I'm one of those people.
Let me ask you. I like to ask people, what's the the earliest memory you have of like learning about drugs? Like that drugs are a thing. Like if you remember anything about it, what maybe the first drug you heard of was like.
Probably alcohol, like seeing people who imbibe alcohol and like what that's like in a social situation, like parents have a dinner party or something, or like mom was an alcoholic forever, you know, and like seeing what that does to someone at a very early age, and having that thing of like, please stop, please don't go out. If you go out, I don't know if you're going to get home safe. I don't know what's going to happen. And so having that very like danger mode mentality surrounding that, as far as seeing other people. And then obviously like, you know, dare to resist drugs and alcohol, like definitely fucking it up of like, if you do heroin, you will die. And it's like, it turns out that that's not entirely true. Like there's a middle ground. There's a way around it. It's a substance that is not like deadly upon, you know, one usage. I understand what people are communicating when they say that, but definitely like not the right way to go about it with kids. And so I'm sure that had something to do with morphing my view on substance use in general, where it's like inherently like, this is wrong. There's something wrong with this, no matter what it may be, you know? But that, and then, you know, like smoking weed at the parking garage in City Place, you know, like 14, 15 years old, and it being a fun, exciting thing to do, and then going off from there and becoming integrated into part of the routine. And then before you know it, it's like, oh, I'm just doing this every day, and it's no longer exciting. It's just something I do. But like, I'd say like alcohol and marijuana, like the first ones that I had exposure to, and then eventually like pills, and various usages of pills and psychedelics, like going into college and encountering that sort of stuff. And there's definitely a time by then where I had obviously started to make up my mind about like, what is this stuff used for? What can I get out of this stuff? But also being at that, like your mind is still forming at like 17, 18 years old. So like that did something as well. So I would say that is like seeing, having an alcoholic parent and having to deal with like, oh no, like you may die if you go out and crash your car because you're about to go driving and you're already like, I can't understand what you're saying. You're so drunk. And so that was probably a very formative thing. Yeah.
Do you think that shaped like, I don't know, not necessarily an aversion, but like not drinking?
Absolutely.
Like yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And having an alcoholic parent who's like, it's fine, it's cool that you smoke weed, like it's no big deal. Like it was basically like a free for all with like, I'm not worried about that as a parent. But drinking is a big issue because of, I know that, you know, something that she had a problem with for many years. So having that authority figure telling you this is okay, this is not okay. And then I just took that ball and ran with it for years, you know, and think like, it's totally okay. I can convince myself that there's nothing bad that this substance can do to me, even though like, You know, anything if you eat too much broccoli, it's gonna fuck your body in
Yeah,
a certain
bro.
way. You know, like it really doesn't matter what it is.
Poison's in the dose. You can
Yeah.
overdose on water.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's been weird. Very weird relationship with alcohol and like having that like disdain for people enjoying themselves, having a few drinks like at a bar or something, and like you're acting the fool, you're being foolish, but also not realizing like how foolish people smoking weed in a room all day in and day out, sitting and doing nothing. Is pretty foolish in and of itself, but it's not out in public and it's not socially acceptable. So there wasn't that level of like resentment towards it of like,
Right.
why is that okay, but this is not, you know?
Right.
So definitely had something to do with it.
What did weed do for you? Like, do you remember the first time you smoked weed?
I remember the first time I smoked weed, and it's like there's a lot of stories people say like they didn't really get that high, and it's like I guess I didn't, but I thought it was cool, you know. I've like from a culture of music and art, I was like, this is something that like artists do like to get the creative juices flowing. So I value this as a thing. And also I want to be cool. So let's do this. And so we smoked a blunt under the City Place parking garage, and it didn't do much, but you know, you play pretend. So there was that. But then the second time I ever smoked weed, I went over a friend's house who had been smoking weed for years. We were like 15 years old. And his mom was okay with it. It was like something where it was just free for all in the household. And so we went over there and I took a hit off of it was like a 16-inch Roar glass bong. And that was my first time smoking, like really smoking weed. And that got me like fucked up. Like, I remember that like burny feeling in the throat. You're like, oh, this is so good. And like it feels like your face is like sort of like not melting, but like it's like it's a strange sensation that like ever since then with this marijuana, it's like caffeine, tobacco, you're like chasing that first high that you got of like, if I can I know I'll be able to get back there one day. And so like that's sort of how it all started. And then it just spiraled out of control from there.
Was it do you think it was just like the feeling itself that you like so much, or do you think it was more just the change, or maybe both?
Probably a little bit of both of
Yeah.
just like, you know, this is like, I've never felt this way before. There's no like thing you can do where you're like, you can make yourself dizzy and, oh, now it's the same thing as feeling highs. Like there's nothing you can do to make yourself feel like that. Like it's like kind of unique in that way. You know, like all drugs are unique where there's no like external equivalent where it's like, well, just do this and it'll make you feel like you've been drunk. It's like, no, it's not the same. So it was that, but also like, this is a way of escaping my toxic household where like it is just not fun to be at home. And so if I can be high while being at home, then maybe that'll make things okay and be able to just like get through it. And then leaving the home and going off to school, like going off to college, it became a social thing where it was just fun for friends to do together. Like it was an outing where we would go and, you know, roll a couple blunts at the beach and do that and go for a walk or whatever. And like it became a very social thing, but it's like all these elements slowly integrating into like, this is just a part of your routine. This is something you do. And so, I don't know. It's been so long and started at such a formative time where I'm like, I don't even know what it did to me. It was just something that I wanted to do all the time, you know? Like from the time I was waking up all the way till like I can't start my day properly if I don't smoke some weed. I can't end my day properly if I don't smoke some weed. There was a period for years, for maybe 10 years, where I was like, I got to smoke some weed on my lunch break. Like, how am I going to eat? You know, I don't have an appetite otherwise. So it just became something that I just had to do all the time. But and it surprised me with like encountering other drugs. Like I've done like opioids, different varying degrees. I've taken LSD, mushrooms, some like synthetic psychedelics. So like I don't even remember the exact names of them. Done Molly,
various
MDMA.
cathinones and shit.
And it was like
Yeah.
TC.
2CB and 2CE.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
So I've taken those, all these different drugs that I felt like, well, like I don't have an addictive response to these sort of drugs. Like with opioids, like there was a period of a couple months where I could access them pretty easily. Like a couple of my friends.
What were you getting?
It was tramadol. So and again, even within that culture, it was like that's a pussy shit. Tramadol, you gonna get addicted to that? And so that's how we all came into it, where it's like whatever, not a big deal. But I was taking like, 8 or 9 pills a day for like a couple months. And I was pretty proud of myself that I was able to just like wean myself off of that and just stop doing it without any sort of intervention-y sort of activities. But
what made you like decide to? First of all, like I had a good friend who was like kind of a running buddy off and on in school that like that was his introduction into opiates. Like that's where he fell in love with opiates was tramadol.
Right.
I never got it because like I'd fucking done like perks and Lortabs and even 30s before I ever got tramadol. So I'm like, what the fuck is this?
If
like,
you want to go back to my very first exposure to opiates in general, it was Suboxone, which is like,
oh, bro, that
that's
shit'll
weird.
fuck you up.
Yeah,
if
I was puking all night. And
intolerant.
it was like
Yeah.
a quarter of a pill, and I was puking
Yeah.
all night. And it was a friend who was trying to get off of opiates, and I don't know why we were just like out driving around, and he's like, "You want to try one?" I was like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" You're always taking this stuff, like, and it was like such a bad experience,
Yeah.
not fun. I remember just like puking up just straight water in the Denny's parking lot, like just flat out, like there's just nothing there, and go in for a glass of water and be like, I have to run outside. So that was like not a fun experience. And then a year or two goes by, and like I had this long standing like daily habit that I just got scared at a certain point because I had seen other friends who would like, they'd fuck their lives up a little bit with opiates and hard drugs in general. It's like, I don't want to do that to myself. Like, my mom's going to kick me out of the house. Like, I can't do this. Like there was like shit on the line for me. And so I said, like, I've got to stop doing this. Like, I know where this is headed. And I know that it's a lot harder for like so many people to do something like that. But I just like had to stop. And so it wasn't cold turkey. Like I like weaned myself off, but got away from that. And, every once in a while it's been like, if there's one floating around, it's like, oh, let me get a perk. Let me get this. And like, it's fun, but, there's definitely that thing there of like, I could probably start doing it again all the time if I wanted to.
Right.
But never really truly hitting bottom. So that also being like kind of a disadvantage for me,
Yeah.
Because what does bottom look like for someone like me? I don't know.
I don't know either, but it's a weird thing how like some people can like with certain substances see like this is, I could see where this is going. I can see what it's done to some of my friends and like cut it out. Dude, I saw so many of my friends like take the path and like in
Just
some
follow them.
senses, yeah,
And just followed him.
Yeah.
Knowing where it was going to go.
Yeah.
But still going, yeah, fuck it.
right,
Tomorrow I'll stop.
yeah,
I'll do it today. Tomorrow I'll stop. Then tomorrow comes. It's like, maybe just one more. And I'll be okay. And then 2 weeks later, you finally decide today's the day. I'm not doing anything. And you get dope sick for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a scary feeling. Like, oh no, like I'm like irritable for no reason, and like my whole body hurts.
Yeah.
Like, this sucks. I can't only imagine what it would be if I was doing like a big boy, opiate.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that was like enough for me to like scare me out of that, and also my experience with friends. And so that was, I would say, like helpful for me to have that kind of exposure at a fairly early time in my like drug exploration. But I've done all this stuff, and for that, by that token, has been like, well, I don't have a problem with this stuff. Like, I probably don't have an addictive personality. Like, I've been able to do these and step away from it. So I'll just keep smoking weed. I can stop any day I want to, which is like, that's obviously bullshit for anyone that has to tell themselves that, because I didn't stop any day.
Was it difficult for you when you finally decided you were done?
Yeah, but there's stuff going on in my life at the time where it's like, this is a fucking make or break situation for me. Like, my life is seriously going to start just going downhill if I continue doing this. It was affecting multiple relationships in my life.
In what ways?
What's that?
In what ways?
Like with my romantic part with Tess, it was like, this is not something that we can continue to do with like my emotional development and my level of motivation. Like,
Yeah.
and it was right around that time where I started to look for a new job. It was like, something's got to happen. And that first week of like, no weed, that was when I got the job offer. And it was like, okay, well, I guess this is something that has done me some good so far.
Yeah.
And so like I had issues with that. I worked for FedEx for 14 years while also at a drug-free workplace, while also like smoking weed all day, every day. And so I felt like it just like kept me in that spot. And there were years, probably 5 or 6 years before that, where I was like, I know this is like keeping me in this spot and I can't move forward unless I do something. And this is the main piece that's keeping me from moving forward. So I had to do something about it. And I can't look back and say it wasn't a good decision. You know, I'm very grateful for the support that I've had and being able to move forward and be cool with it. And like a couple of our friends in solidarity were like, you know what, I'm going to stop smoking too. Like, that's a good idea. Let's do this. I was like, wow, it's like very cool to, you know, have a couple of friends that are doing this. And, you know, they've since gone back and because I just feel like I'm like how a lot of addicts, I'm sure, feel of like, well, my relationship with this drug is special. It's not like how everyone else is. Like I have a big problem with it. And so I can't go back. And so it's been very helpful. My therapy sessions have been better since then, able to open up more. And so that was like the big thing. That's like, I need to make more money. I hate my job. And also I love my relationship so much with my partner that I can't do anything more to like further fuck that up. So like I had to do something about it. So very grateful for those things to, you know, kick my ass into gear.
What do you think it was that, like, where does the association lie with like your cannabis use and you like putting off leaving FedEx? Like, do you think it was like kind of allowing you to be complacent?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Motivation. Just
Yeah.
like lack of motivation of like, well, I'm making just enough money to get by and I don't have the wherewithal or the imagination to think of like what could be if I worked a little bit harder. And like, I don't know, it seems to mess with your sleep routines and your energy levels. Like obviously it's like you don't want to do anything after work, and it's like that's when the shit happens. That's when you have to be able to do something to get into that other place where you have a better job, or you've moved on with a living situation or whatever, extracurricular projects or whatever. And so like it was killing my motivation. You know, it's like, it's exactly what they said in Dare, where it's like, it'll make you not want to do anything. You'll be a dumb like lump on a couch, which I definitely was. So
It's still so funny to me how much we talk about Dare. Like that, every time we've asked that question, almost
really?
every time, it's like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, my first, it was Dare.
Yeah.
And it's like,
they told us certain things that are like, is this healthy to be teaching a kid about? Like, I know there are like areas where there are groups of kids who are like, they're dealing with this shit at a very young age and they need to have this talk. But like, I grew up in Boca and went to Catholic school. Like there was no need for that, you know, of like, if you do this, you will die. And so
It was likely more detrimental than like it.
Yeah.
There was a need for substance education, but
Right.
not fucking
Not in that
the
way.
approach of Dare in 5th grade. Like, yeah, I don't know. Like Eddie said, like it always comes out like for our generation, like that.
Yeah.
It's been so.
it's so funny.
Dude, Dare is what piqued my interest in drugs. Like,
Right.
flat out.
That's
like,
the joke that everyone says is like, they'll say in Dare, like, well, this is what you do and this is how you do this drug. And you're like, interesting. I think I might try that. Like, it gives you a lot of ideas as a kid of not having that executive decision making to be like, and that's because it's the wrong thing to do. They're preparing me for something. It's like, you just gave me a fucking idea and that might be fun.
that sounds like fun.
Yeah.
You know, I want to feel like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't
What they thought were scare tactics,
And it's
in
such a
some
nat-
ways were like
It's
that
like a
sounds
natural,
pretty cool.
it's a natural human pursuit to be like, I want to like alter my state of mind, you know, like it's not something like any adult that I see out there that like, I'm kind of like, I'm sorry for people out there, like if this is how you are, but it's like, if there are adults who are like, I just never saw the point in doing drugs or like alcohol or anything like that. It's like, you're a fucking space alien. Like, I don't understand. I don't understand how you are. Like that seems to be a integral part of the human experience to, you know, to our disadvantage or otherwise. Is
Not
like,
just humans, animals get high too.
Hell yeah.
I just saw an article the other day. It was talking about how dolphins and blowfish,
Pufferfish, yeah.
pufferfish,
Oh, really?
yeah, how it's like deadly to everything else in the sea. They're poison,
Mm-hmm.
but dolphins will bump their nose up and pass it around because
Don't
they
bogart that puffer fish.
Yeah, because they get high off its toxin. They don't.
Wow.
It doesn't hurt them, but they get like a buzz from it.
Exactly.
Cheetahs, I think it's a grass that they eat,
Oh,
but
yeah.
it's a DMT containing grass,
Mm.
and apparently, like cheetahs don't have like the monoamine oxidase in their gut that like keeps you from being able to metabolize DMT.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
That's why you have to make it.
orally.
Yeah.
Right. If you
Right.
take DMT orally, you have to take an MAOI, a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, with it, so that you can actually like absorb it. That's why ayahuasca is a DMT containing vine, but the actual ayahuasca vine
different
is
thing.
the MAOI.
Oh, it's an activator or whatever.
Exactly.
Okay. And the whole fermented berries thing with animals looking for that, it's like, this is not, this is like a thing that like living
monkeys
things-
love alcohol, dude. Like there's so many like videos on like resorts of like monkeys that like hang around and like get people's leftover drinks or just
Yeah.
steal people's drinks.
I had a friend who had a pig that used to, like, we would throw parties at his house, you know, like high school parties or whatever, and this pig would come over and it would knock your beer over and start drinking it. Yeah, dude. So, yeah. Animals definitely, you know, it's not just humans.
Yeah.
And so I very deeply like feel that way of like this. That's an important part of the human experience is doing a drug and seeing like, it's like you'll never know what the drug does to you unless you take it, but you'll never know what exactly sobriety feels like until you go and see the other and like, you know, fuck your mind up in some way. Like you're never going to know what you are taking advantage of, really. And so maybe that's the kind of thing that like a lot of former addicts will say like, you know, I love sobriety. Like it's such a valuable thing to me because I know what the other thing is like and
Right.
I see what I can and can't do with these different states of mind. But I don't know. I think people should explore with like substances in general, like within, you know, safe for safety and stuff. But like, I don't know. It's our right and it's our privilege as human beings to make that decision.
Certainly should be.
Yeah.
Some might say, I mean, you say, and I would agree, that altering one's consciousness is like a part of the human experience.
Mm-hmm.
Some might even say it is what created the human experience.
Dude, the whole stoned ape theory,
Stoned ape
Yeah.
theory,
that's- I don't
it's
wanna get
always
started.
fun.
I love that theory. I think
I
it's
think
so
we've talked about
yeah,
it here.
yes. And I got that
few
book, the
times.
food of the gods book.
Yeah, oh, yeah,
It's
yeah,
fucking,
yeah.
like highly recommend.
Yeah.
But I don't know how much basis there is in that theory, like evidence wise. But like,
I don't know.
Was
It's
it
no
mon-
more,
monkeys-
no
monkeys
less
ate
than other
mushrooms
theories.
or something
I
like
would
that,
say.
right?
yeah, like
And became conscious.
yes,
Yeah.
that's like what spurred the evolutionary process and like
There is a lot of like, if you listen to fucking Dennis McKenna, Terrence McKenna's
McKenna.
brother, like
Okay.
kind of spell it out. There's a lot of interesting, like the Ice Age ending and then moving into like more grassland areas where there were mushrooms and like there's a lot of different
coincidental type stuff. Where you're like
things
how
that are
is this-
taken into consideration
Right.
that are historically like verified that climate wise and like what was happening on the planet at the time and where, you know, fucking chimps or hominids were and this massive growth in the prefrontal cortex.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
we do know that psilocybin creates new neural pathways.
Right. Yeah. You start to think in ways that you didn't before,
Right.
and that's like the value of that. And like,
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, like I love
It's
that.
fun
theory.
to think about,
It's
but
so
like,
cool, but I don't know. Like Tess is a practiced anthropologist and has studied a lot of that stuff, and is like,
Yeah,
in
I
the
know.
community, it's kind of like laughed at.
In
a
my
little bit.
opinion, it's no more, no less.
I love it.
Than any other theory. You want to say something,
She's
Tess?
like struggling.
Just fucking talk.
Come on.
Come on over and say something. She's sitting there like, because she's got a lot of
And then
things
you
to
can
say
go,
about
and
that.
then you say something, and then go back over there so I can have
Because
the last
I got
word
the
on
book
it.
and I was like, dude, like I'm reading this book, it's so cool. And she's like, yeah,
Yeah,
let me.
she'll shit on your party.
So, right. So you can say that there's evidence that can help you prove something, and then there's a theory that has a lot of contextual implications. And you could say, we can assume or we can imply that this is a strong possibility.
Right.
So if you're speaking in scientific terms, you come to conservative conclusions, which is different than saying something happened, but you can say there's enough contextual implications that this is possible, but there's not enough evidence. That's not something that we can record because we don't have archaeological evidence
We can't go back to it.
Of the actual structure of the human brain beyond like cranial measurements, and even that is not necessarily showing us functions. And even now, like there's news coming out this week with Homo naledi and pushing back the time period and the species with which we have examples of ritual burials with people. So science is always evolving, and you want to get as much evidence as you possibly can to come to such strong conclusions. I think it's a great theory, and that there's a lot of things that make it interesting and valid enough to continue to talk about, but it's not provable at this point.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think anybody. I'm certainly not. So that's what I meant by like it's no more or no
But
less.
it's super fun to
But
think
there are
about.
theories that you can
Verifiable
prove.
that-
Yeah.
Like gravity, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because it's something.
Yeah, but I mean,
Well, the jury's still out on that
And
one.
that's where I'll end this. So thank you, everyone.
No, dude.
I love that
Test
idea.
gravity every now and then.
I'm just gonna go through life saying that the stoned ape theory is absolutely true. 'Cause
There's no evidence to prove it otherwise. So it's like, hey, why not? You know.
fucking
But I mean, in that way, like
possibility.
I see the value, and it's like it helps open your mind in ways of like you can talk to so many different people, and it won't change your mindset in the way that like eating mushrooms might. You know, like there's a very like interior like experience with yourself that I think is very important for a lot of people. I think there's a lot of people that could do with a psychedelic drug trip at one point in their lives to help give some perspective.
I mean, these days it's being used a lot more in like therapies.
Yeah, which I think is super cool. I was hearing it on CNN the other day. They were talking about that, like legalizing that for testing for certain like psychological disorders or whatever. Like that's super cool. You know, like why not?
I saw an ad the other day that was psychological journaling. They send you this whole kit, psychological therapy, and you
Ketamine.
I don't know what the.
I think there's an at-home ketamine service.
I don't know if
now.
it was ketamine or what it was.
Yeah.
I get a lot of mushroom ads, like those pills and stuff.
Yes.
I'm not sure if those are psychedelic.
Who knows
No,
what you're
they're
getting?
fucking like
think-
Lion's Mane and
Yeah,
stuff, like
yeah,
the Magic
so-
Mind or whatever.
But I get a lot of weird
Yeah.
things on there. But that was one of them that had like a psychedelic therapy journal kind of thing. And there's a whole kit or whatever that
I love
comes
that.
with.
Yeah.
It's cool the access. You know.
But
Yeah.
I never like clicked on it to look to see what it was, and
You end up
or
on some
what
list.
It's
they're- what they're
probably the
using.
at-home
I'm not
ketamine
worried about
thing.
being on some list.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably a legit thing. I would, it's not like some backwards website I'm on or something like that.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's a legit ad, but I just never looked into to see what the psychedelic element was.
Mhm. The weird thing is like that, like you're saying, like it's cool that like that seems progressive to us now.
Right.
But like, dude, all we're fucking doing is picking up where we left off. Like,
Yeah.
40 years ago, 60 years, whenever the fuck, like in the MDMA was being used all around the country in therapy. And
Yeah.
like it was forced underground by the emergency fucking classification as a controlled substance. The DEA put
Right.
out like no reason. It was like the first time they ever put out a prohibition on a substance without going through like the formal process
right.
that they had to do. Just an emergency like shutdown of this whole thing where like there were studies happening, like it was being used, not just MDMA, but psilocybin and other psychedelics. Like we were already on this train, and then like fucking just decades
God
we
forbid
lost
people
because
use it
of
recreationally.
drug policy.
That's
Yeah.
that's the problem with like, will people use the drug recreationally?
Yep.
What sort of subculture is this associated with? And like,
That's what it was.
well, we're going to scare the people in the suburbs very easily by telling them all these horror stories. And the what is the famous book that never happened? What is her
The
name?
famous book that never happened.
Yeah, the story. The
Are you
story.
talking about the holes in the brain?
No,
That's another
What's her
thing that's
name?
interesting.
Shit, I can't think of it right now.
Describe the context of the book.
She had some sort of psychedelic drug experience, and her life went to shit, and she ended up in an insane asylum or something from that. And it turned out that it was not a true story in any way.
Okay,
I'm
interesting.
trying to remember the name. Like, I'll look it up while we're talking here. But
I mean, that's something that can happen. It's not like if you're predisposed to schizophrenia or like a psychosis disorder, like psychedelics can certainly kick that off.
Is it?
I know somebody who changed dramatically after an acid trip. Like, his personality changed. He went a little crazy. Like, there was definitely some effect that LSD had on his brain that changed him, and it was after a bad trip too. Like, it was. Actually, I know two people that happened to. One of them tried to commit suicide on acid.
Oh my
God. Said that Tupac, he had a poster of Tupac on his wall, told him to kill himself, so he dropped they had a weight bench, and he dropped it on his neck.
Jesus. Oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. Go Ask Alice is the name of the book.
Okay, I've heard of that book.
And it's like she was a 15-year-old girl and runs away from home, journey of self-discovery. But it's like these scare tactics that were used around that time as part of like the beginnings of like the 20th century culture war of like this is the straight people versus the free-thinking people who were like,
oh, we don't like those.
Yeah,
we don't like free thinkers.
And that term has definitely mutated a lot over the years where, free thinkers are sometimes some of the most closed-minded people you can meet who claim, do your own research and all that. But like, yeah, I think that was a very special time in terms of like the drug culture evolving and coming to a point where it's like, oh, I think something's going to change. Like, people are getting more open about like religion and spirituality and drugs and music and art, and different groups are talking to each other. And then like, the fucking big bad government came down and said like, that's not going to happen anymore. And like, yeah, we've sort of been like in a dark age for a little bit. It seems to be starting to change around a little bit. Like, oh, God willing, hopefully like things continue to go the way that they're going. But like, I think it's a good thing.
I mean, shit's just safer too. That way.
Yeah.
Like when we like
what you're getting.
Things about stuff, and when drugs are legal and they can be studied, like, and we can have real information. So the holes in the brain thing, you guys heard that MDMA causes holes in
I think
your
I've heard
brain?
that before.
That used to be a
That
thing.
was a big thing, and like people would cite a specific study. So there were like two things. I think in the 90s or early 2000s, Oprah did some special with some like some
Of course
fucking
it's
like
Oprah.
girl
Oprah, dude.
some chick came on who like was some big party girl, and like I think her mom brought her on. I don't remember like the details, but they had her go in for like these scans that like they did, like their team had her do like these scans, and then they came back and like on the show were showing like these are all these like holes in your brain, and like this is caused by your ecstasy use. And then Rick Doblin, is it Rick Doblin, the guy who founded MAPS, Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, like a few years later, like he followed up with this girl and like that show, because I think Oprah's team like contacted him to come on. It's this whole thing, because MAPS has been heading the way in MDMA research for PTSD, and they're like just finished their like final phase of clinical trials. So they've done big things. Like he was the one who basically like came up with a way to get things unscheduled. Like he developed, like that was his thesis or whatever for his degree, was like writing this whole thing on how to basically change drug policy to allow for therapeutic studies.
Right.
It's
like so important. It's like, what are we going to do? Keep ourselves in the dark and not want to research about this stuff more? It's like, there's people in the black market researching it every day. Like, you don't want to become a part of that and learn with them?
Right. Force it underground.
So frustrating.
But he, so I guess like they had contacted him, then he tried to like get the girl to come back on the show and like said, how about we do another brain scan, but have like a third party do it. And it was this whole thing, and then they never ended up like doing it. Like they didn't want to fucking follow through with that or whatever. But there's a study that was in like the 70s or 80s that they did where they were dosing mice supposedly with MDMA, and this has been well documented. They showed holes in the brain, they showed neurotoxicity, and then they said MDMA is neurotoxic because of this study. So some time passes, they find out that the drug that they had received, so the company that was doing the study orders their drugs from this like one distributor who manufactures the drugs and distributes them to like pharmaceutical studies and shit like that,
Right.
places that are doing it. They find out that instead of MDMA, they had sent them methamphetamine and the bottles were mislabeled. And then each of them like blamed each other. They're like, no way that this happened. Like we wouldn't have mislabeled them. But it was verified that what they were giving the mice was methamphetamine and not MDMA. And additionally, like a reasonable dose, like a threshold dose of MDMA is around like 75, but like a standard 125 milligrams is probably what you would give a mouse, or like whatever the, not 125, but whatever the equation is for weight. Fucking 125 milligrams of meth for a person is not the same as 125 milligrams of MDMA. Like methamphetamine would be dosed similarly to like other amphetamine medications, 10, 20, 30 milligrams,
Right, a lot less.
not typical MDMA dosages. So these mice were basically getting overdosed on meth like consistently, and then they saw holes in their brains and then said MDMA causes holes in the brains,
Right,
even
there
though
was-
we got the whole
It was
wrong
published
drug.
at that point, and so it's like
Yep.
the people that want to
retraction.
confirmation bias. They're like, we're just going to continue to use this. We
Yep.
don't care about the retraction,
Yep.
about the whatever edit to this study. It's like you've just proved what we want to say, so we're
Right.
just going to take that and run with it. Like
That's how it goes with a lot of things. Whenever something's
Yeah.
put out there, the retraction gets
not as popular.
half the attention, if as much.
It happens in the news too. Whenever they make a
Exactly.
mistake and they go back, they're like, let's put that on page 11 or whatever. No one wants to read when we were wrong.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate.
A lot of misinformation about drugs and misunderstandings, and a lot of it is caused by prohibition and like criminalization of drugs. Like
Yeah.
we get these fucking, even like PCP. Like the PCP is probably like one of the most stigmatized drugs.
For sure.
Which like every other fucking Gen Zer out there is like doing ketamine at every other weekend and thinking nothing of it, and it's not very different. Like ketamine's a derivative of PCP, both dissociative anesthetics. But we have all these horror stories like PCP gives people superhuman strength,
Yes.
blah blah
You're
blah.
gonna eat somebody's face.
Yeah,
Yes.
or claw your eyeballs out.
Right.
What's his name, Tess? Charles Ennis. So this is a dude who was like, what, small time drug dealer? Fucking Baltimore? Some city. I want to say Baltimore. Some city. If it's not Baltimore, sorry Baltimore PD. Yeah. Gets raided, or gets word that he's getting raided, and ends up doing,
Actually, like an entrapment thing.
Oh yeah, I heard this story.
what were the details of like the leading up to it?
Here we go. I remember hearing this story.
Yeah, it's totally fun. And like again, like everybody took that and said like PCP is this.
It's like that's an extreme example.
So the original thing was like, it was like an entrapment thing with the police. So the police had contacted him about purchasing hash. And so he goes to this deal. But somebody tips him off that it's like the police. And then once they're at the deal, they're like, will you sell some cocaine as well? He's like, actually, no, because you were going to purchase hash from me. And then it like came out that that the police were being stupid and doing an illegal thing, and he basically publicly embarrassed the police with this like entrapment case. And so like to get back at him, they were gonna raid his house. And then he had like a lot of PCP, and he didn't want to get caught with it. So he like did all of it. And then they put him into like solitary confinement with all of the lights shut off. And he was scratching his eyes because
It's a dissociative anesthetic.
Yeah,
you can't feel
and
shit.
you're very disoriented.
Yeah.
So, but they were like, oh, this guy went so fucking crazy on PCP. He clawed his own eyes out. But it was really more like a police brutality thing where they put him in a really like inhumane situation to try to like make a public point, sort of a thing.
If it was such a dangerous drug, you wouldn't have to go to all those lengths to make the public point, to be like, look, he just did it once and look at what he did. It's like,
Right.
that's not what happened.
Well, also, I mean, PCP was used in medicine as an anesthetic for a long time. I
Right.
mean, yeah, they stopped because there were some like weird reactions, but like
Everyone's chemically
it's-
different. Like, that's not
exactly,
a
that's
good
drugs.
example of like, look at what it does to people. It's
Right.
like, that's some dare shit. Like, that's like bullshit propaganda that like, I don't know why it's someone's agenda out there to be like, drug use should not be allowed. Like, I just don't understand what place that comes from. If anything, I think it's a place of fear. All these elected officials, like, I'm afraid of, people expanding their minds enough so they realize this whole system is kind of like bullshit, like what this is all put together.
yeah, I don't know. Like that's like my traditional like 16-year-old view, and I don't disagree with it. It just seems too simple.
Yeah,
You
that's
know what
true.
I mean?
That's true.
Like,
But
that
I'm like,
just seems like
I keep arriving
really
back
the
and it's like,
establishment that afraid of like
why? Why then? You
Right.
know, it's so weird. Like it has something to do with control. It's like, well, it's easier to control these people. You know.
I would say control. I would say if I really had to put a guess, it's the war on drugs is very profitable.
Yeah, that's true.
For-profit
We
prisons.
say it's like it's race motivated too, to be like
Yeah.
favor certain races above others, and like make certain communities more targeted in terms of who you policing more. And that's a big thing of like just making it a tool to be like, well, people use drugs. A lot of people use drugs. And these groups use drugs and we don't like them. So let's just use that as our scapegoat. And then these people over here, we're just not going to worry about, mom and dad taking their narcotic pills and, whatever kids in the suburbs smoking weed. Like, we'll focus on these urban communities that we already hated for another reason that I do not understand, and get these people off of the street. It's like, I don't know. It's all evil to me.
And yet, Big Pharma's created more addicts than the streets have.
Yes. Yeah, it's so crazy. The dichotomy of like, the stuff is very wide. Like, someone's producing all this stuff out there, but you're also saying like, oh, you're a junkie, you're a piece of shit. It's like, I got this stuff from the system. Like, this is where it came from. Like, it didn't come out of a vacuum. So
Yeah, a lot of heroin addicts started because of a doctor
right.
giving them pain pills.
Right, exactly. That was probably some of my earlier exposure to painkillers. Even like between the Suboxone and starting to tramadol was like, I had spinal stenosis. Thanks, FedEx. Just horrible back pain, and like it was like the third and fourth, fifth vertebrae, and having to go on Percocet or whatever, and going to physical therapy and doing whatever. And it's like it didn't really help. But like those are my early exposures to be like, I just went to the doctor and they said, here, you should take this stuff. I'm like, well, there must be something of value in this drug.
Then it stops working. Then you got to double up and then triple up. Next thing you know, you ran through your prescription too early,
That's scary.
and then now you got to go to the streets. Yeah.
Like, what else am I supposed to do? You know?
Say, I know a lot of people that turn to heroin and things like that because of that
They got
reason.
cut off,
you know,
yeah.
they had a prescription of whatever, and next thing you know, it stops working, and they got to double up on it. Prescription runs out. Well, what do you do? Now I got to go to the streets. Now the pills don't work anymore because the heroin's much better. I'm going to keep doing the heroin.
You
And
can't go
it's
back
cheap.
to it.
Yeah.
You can't dial it back without an immense amount of pain
No,
if you're
yeah,
in one of those
there's not.
situations.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like damned if you do, damned if you don't type of thing.
Yeah.
And even with like other recreational drugs like cocaine and stuff, like people who have that ADHD tendency of like, I need to slow my brain down, or like I need my brain to keep up with whatever. It's like it does something to you that a lot of people just may go their whole life undiagnosed with something like
Mm-hmm.
that and never know that, like, oh, that's why this substance clicked for me so much. I'm not an evil person inherently. It's just like I have a neurological issue, and this is helping me deal with it. You know?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I have ADHD and never been diagnosed.
Yeah.
It's funny. I was reading some of the symptoms of it. I'm like, I got that one. I got that one. I got that one. It's like this makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
As far as like prohibition and criminalization and all that, I don't know. There's just a lot of motivation for keeping illegal drugs illegal and legal drugs like pharmaceuticals legal.
The industries are so big. It's like, what are we going to do? Like, force them to shut down? Like, they're making a lot of money for everybody.
Also, they are the biggest lobbying group, big pharma in the country. I think big tobacco is like the second biggest. But there'd be a lot of people out of jobs if like prohibition on all substances were lifted, if those substances were not just decriminalized but like legalized and regulated. Cartels don't exist without the DEA,
Right.
and DEA doesn't exist without cartels.
Yeah, it's like it's a nice symbiotic relationship
They scratch
have.
each other's back. They profit off each other.
It's so crazy.
And they both know it. Like they know that DEA is gonna get like 20% of what comes through. DEA knows that they're only gonna get 20% of what comes through, and then the rest, like there's profit on all ends.
Like, it's job security. What are we going to do? Bust
Right.
everybody all at once? Like,
I've had
there's
cops
something
tell
else.
me they wouldn't have a job if it wasn't for drugs and alcohol.
Yeah, dude, that is why cannabis was made illegal in the first place. Was when prohibition of alcohol ended. Like fucking,
Cops need
there
something
were
to do.
they needed Henry Anslinger, like
Yeah.
dude who was head of what is now DEA.
Yeah.
needed something to go after because he
I
was
love-
going to be out of a job.
I love the paradox of, like, when those laws first started, he was like Harry J. Anslinger and the laws around that. He was like, only people with this certain license can grow the cannabis plant. And so you have to go here to apply for the license. But everyone who would go to apply would be, like, arrested because they were already trying to grow a cannabis plant. It's like, there's no way to win in that situation. You just wanted to end it. And so...
There was a period where some affluent white folks could get the
Oh, yeah,
tax
of course.
thing. You pay a tax. But yeah, it's interesting because we kind of come full circle in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
like with
yeah.
the medical program,
We're
like,
still it's like
I'm glad we have it, but like at the end of the
Yeah.
day, dude, you're just fucking paying a tax to legally smoke weed.
I
Like,
know. Like, that's all it is. It's like the doctor that I talked to was like, it was a fucking joke.
Yeah, you know.
We talked to him on the phone. Like, it was originally going to be an in-person appointment, and then they're like, yeah, we can do it over the phone. I was like, phone doctors? I was like, all right, it's post-COVID, I guess, whatever. And he was like, so what, tell me about this. And I'm like, well, I have like anxiety and, I have back pain and like, yeah, it's hard to sleep. And he's like, great. That's, yeah, okay, you're good. So, and it was like a 5-minute phone call. Like,
That's how my appointment was. Except my first appointment for my med card was in person. Everyone after that, though, was just a phone
just
call.
call.
How's it working for you? What are you taking? What's your regimen?
still gets me high.
Yeah.
Do you need
Oh,
me
they
to
don't
up
even
any,
ask me that shit,
Do
dude.
you need me to
Yeah,
up
yeah.
any limits for you? I can, make the limits
They
higher.
just give me the max
never-
on
they didn't limit
everything.
me on anything.
I see it's 2 minutes, bro. Like I go in there, he's like, "Wait, help you sleep. You get PTSD."
Great.
Yep. Sounds good. You've been doing all right. What do you do for work again? All right, cool. All right, see you in 7 months.
It's a political thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
and you pay the state $75 a year.
Right.
That's
A
all it
year.
is.
It's like every.
7
Mine was
months.
No,
every.
you pay
every 3 months.
The
I think.
state is $75 a year.
Oh, yeah, true.
The
Yep.
doctor you have to do every
Every-
7 months. I
Something like
think.
that.
I
Yeah.
think I was getting every 3 months. I'd get the phone call.
Oh,
You know?
were you having to pay every time? They can give
Yeah.
you 7 months of recommendations legally.
Wow,
it might be
yeah.
9.
Yeah.
Maybe
Either
it was
7
more
or
than that.
9.
Maybe it was more. I don't.
But to
remember
go
now.
back to that is like that was a moment where like I was at that crossroads where I got a call from the doctor and they're like, hey, like your prescription's expiring soon. And I was already thinking like, I think I should probably stop. Like no one flat out told me you should stop, but I was like, this has to be the main contributing factor. And I was like, you know what? Let me just let that fucker expire and not go back to it, because if I was just getting it from a dude on the street or some person's house who I didn't like there would be nothing stopping me from keeping going there. But the fact that there's a legit market for it is like, well, I've sort of closed that door for myself, so I can't go back,
Right.
We were
Or
in the middle of an argument when he got the
Yeah.
Like very.
I was like, this is a
shit.
sign. Yeah,
Yeah.
like we were talking about like something needs to change in your life. Like, what is the problem? It's got to have to do with smoking weed. Like, we're not moving forward in our relationship. You're not moving forward in your life. Like, nothing's happening. And then I got the phone call, and I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, I'll get back to you. Fuck, all right. I guess that's telling me something here. Like, you know, the main, like the higher, whatever, cosmic order is like sort of aligning at a point where it's like, it's time to make do with these tips that I'm hearing,
Right.
you know, subconsciously. So
I feel like I smoked a lot less when I got my card, but I also came off of 4 years of absolute sobriety.
oh, that'll do it to you.
And
You
then
go
I got
rubber
my
band
card.
it. Yeah.
Then I got my card, and you know, wouldn't do it during the day. When I smoked back in the day, it was like all day, every day, like we talked about
Yeah.
before. Then I got it, and I'm like, I have it, and it seemed more like I'm just too lazy to pack a bowl. I feel like, you know,
Like, yeah, that's some good shit that you're getting.
I got to walk outside and go sit in my car, you know, because I don't smoke in the house.
Okay.
So it's like I got to go sit out there. There's mosquitoes. I don't feel like doing
Forget
it.
it.
Now.
Yeah,
You know,
interesting.
before nothing would stop me. You know,
Right.
I don't, whatever.
It's funny
But-
how barriers work that way. I mean, when I first got the card, I was like, I went fucking crazy on Keef and stuff, and I was like, oh, it's like a kid in the candy store. Like I had been a daily smoker for like 13 years, 14 years at that point. So I already had tasted all the flavors. I knew what I
Right.
liked. I had a high tolerance, so I went fucking nuts for a while.
I mean, it was a cool experience. First time walking in, and from the doctor's visit to the first time walking into dispensary, I'm like, this is cool. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? This is awesome. I don't have to worry about, you know, getting busted in the parking lot or something anymore.
It was nice,
You know?
and the coolness. It was like, oh, this isn't fun anymore. It's just like a thing that I do.
Yeah.
And every time I would go, I'd feel like, here I go again. Like they're probably sick of seeing me here like once, twice a week.
Yeah.
Getting like a quarter like every time, and it's like, man, you're putting it away, man. Like you're a regular customer. It's
That
like,
is
you know.
pretty hefty. I mean,
Yeah.
I used to smoke that much, but I fucking.
It was the money for me, man. I was spending $200 a pop walking in there. You know,
Yeah.
I need my edibles because they help me to sleep. You know,
Yeah.
and then of course you got to get some flour.
Of course.
You know, you can't not. You know,
You're like,
so-
oh, pre-rolls.
Yep.
Like maybe I.
Oh, you got a
like,
sale today? Okay, let me get 2 of them.
I
you
love
know?
when they'd be like, it's halfway to 420. We have a sale. I'm like, y'all just pick anything. You
They had
can
a,
to
they had a
make it
sale every time I walked in there, man.
Oh, truly, for sure. Like,
Well, Cure Leaf, especially
Yeah.
Cure
Yeah,
Leaf,
Cure Leaf was like
always
that.
has some kind of like two things of gummies, you know, instead of one or whatever. You know, it's
They
like,
always had something going on.
or
With
if you spend $150, you get 50 bucks off your
off,
order. Okay,
Rise did a fucked up thing where like I went there a few times because they were one of the Keef spots I would go to where they were never out, and then I didn't go there for a while, and they emailed me, hey, we miss you. It's been a while. Here's $25 towards your
Yep.
next visit. I was like, are you serious? And I went in there, and it ended up just being free. And I'm like, all right, well, that was great. Like,
sweet.
it's very interesting how like it just sort of became ingrained in this capitalist-based commerce of like it's just like anything else at this point. It's not some weird like subvertive sort of like I don't know. It's not like a back alley thing. All you do is make it legal, and it becomes just like a regular
as it
store.
should
you know?
be. Yeah.
Actually, I honestly would prefer just to walk into the store
Yeah.
instead
no,
of
that's
dealing
what
with
I-
some asshole, you know,
Yeah,
that
of
course,
and
yeah. Makes
waiting
it a lot
on them.
easier.
Oh, I'm out, and then you got to
Yeah.
wait.
It's weird how the psychology of that works though, where it's like there's got to be a correlation. It's no coincidence that
No,
like
it's-
countries that legalize these drugs, they see a lower rate in drug addiction and problems and crime surrounding it. And like within a year and a half of me getting this card, I stopped seeing the fun, exciting part of doing this drug. It just became a thing that I just did. I'm like, this is fucking boring.
It makes
It's
it
so
less
weird, ain't
taboo. It makes it
Yeah.
like it normalizes it the same way like you like the rates of people who use heroin and have heroin addiction in the United States
Right.
versus the rates of people who use alcohol and have an alcohol use disorder. Like the people who use heroin, the more higher proportion of them do like have an opiate use disorder than those who have an alcohol use disorder.
I wonder why.
Because like this is ingrained into our society. People learn from a young age. This is my opinion. People learn from a young age that it's possible to drink responsibly. They can see, like, not everybody, obviously people like grow up in households with alcoholics for sure.
Right.
But there's societal exposure to responsible, normal use. And then your exposure to all these other drugs through Dare or through fucking television is the only way to use heroin is to fucking like be strung out. And then that's what we see. But there, like, dude, there's cultures where like people like in Afghanistan, like people smoke opium and
Right.
like
Yeah.
they don't all like, they're not all just strung out on opium necessarily. Like in cultures where certain substances are normalized, you don't see that same problematic use as you do when they're like taboo.
Right, because there's people in this society that are like, it's okay. You don't have to keep it this horrible, dark secret
Right.
where you're like, I can't tell anyone about it, and so I will never get help as a result of
Right.
that. Like, you can be more open with people and, you know, talk to, like, I remember talking to people at the Cure Leaf, like, man, like, this is, like, my tolerance is really high. And like, well, if that's a problem, I've heard this is what you can do. And, like, ever since the law passed in Florida, you see more and more articles of, like, here's some signs that you're not using cannabis in a responsible way. Like you're not using it in the healthiest way.
Right.
Or, you know, like just the more nuances around like using any sort of mind altering substance is like when it's normalized in a social way, then people start talking about it.
Yeah.
And it's not a dark
Right.
secret that no one, and then no information is being exchanged when no one wants to talk about it. And so like, that's such an important part of like, let's all talk about our drug use and then maybe we'll all be better because
Exactly.
of it, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I really value what y'all are doing in terms of making it an open forum for like, let's talk about what you're doing and what you're working on. And like, you might end up coming away learning something, or I might end up learning something. Like that's how we better ourselves as people, is like with these interactions with other people in social situations, you know?
I genuinely believe that like kids growing up in the midst of like legalization of cannabis, far less of them are gonna like smoke weed problematically.
I see the
and
memes
do
where
it
it's like,
every day.
oh, you smoke weed, like that's lame, like you think you're so cool. It's like, it's no
Right.
longer cool anymore because
Well,
it's something you just go to get at a store, you
and
know?
I think that they see responsible use. Like it's not
Right.
like this fucking thing that like if you like, so we know that if you use heroin once or any opiate, that doesn't mean you're going to get addicted. Like if you go to the ED, as they say in Europe,
Right.
for like some traumatic injury, like you break your leg or something, where they would give you morphine or Dilaudid in the United States, you're most likely going to get diamorphine in Europe, which is diacetylmorphine, which is heroin. That doesn't, like, not everybody who goes out of that hospital fucking, like,
Right.
just immediately goes and looks for heroin on the street. Most people do not. And in the same way, like, if there were examples of responsible use of this drug or that in our society because it was accessible, I think that just as it applies to cannabis, I think it would apply across the board. I really do. And I think like there's also an aspect of like a famine mentality when it comes to drugs that makes it more like the fact that things are less accessible. Like you just
want them
fucking,
more.
you're gonna
like
crave them, you're
it's
gonna
so
chase
weird
them.
how that psychology of that is.
Yeah.
Like that's what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah, I remember the days, the pill days, man. You get down to your last, 2 or 3 pills, and you already start to freak out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh damn, I need to get more now.
You're thinking ahead,
Yeah, even when I worked in treatment, man, the kids that were on Suboxone, they'd get down to their last couple of strips, and when can I see my doctor? When can I see my doctor? When can I see my doctor? It's like,
You're good.
that fear of.
I don't know. That's
running
but that was,
out.
that's early recovery, like with MAT, and that was for me an interesting thing. And it's the same thing because I had regular access and never actually had, because they were thinking that way, not because of their relationship to Suboxone or buprenorphine, but because of their long history
Yeah,
of their relationship
absolutely.
with opiates. And over time for me, because I thought that same way too, dude. Like
Right.
they fucking, like when I went to the outpatient, I went to TRN, like they gave you like a little lockbox to keep your Suboxone and your medications in. And you'd fucking like, dude, I would take that lockbox if I had an appointment in Miami, I took that lockbox to Miami.
Right, just in case.
I knew I was gonna be back.
Yeah.
Like fucking.
That's how I was
by
with the weed
noon.
room. Like, and I stopped doing that after a while. But it's like you got your bag, and you're like, I've got to have this wherever I'm going,
Right.
Yeah.
Just in case.
There was
'Cause
that-
you never know what's gonna happen.
There was
It's
that
like,
fear, but over time, like, it wasn't at the front of my mind. My first like month or two, because that's how I was used to treating opiates and
Yeah.
like my medications and whatever, was like, fuck, like I got to make sure I have them. Like if I need them, like it was always on the forefront of my mind. Anything I did, that came first. Like
Yep.
I'd made every decision I made was shaped by
Yep.
like my opiate use.
yeah.
As I like slowly started building a life, getting into things that weren't using opiates, and like it became less and less a focus. I didn't think about it
Right.
until like I got to the point where fucking like I would forget to take it if I didn't set the alarm that told me
Wow.
to take it. Just like any medication or vitamin that I take, because like I
Because
take
it's
this
normalized
vitamin
in that
the
way.
morning,
Because you view
Yeah.
it like any other medication.
Right.
Because that's what it is.
and I
you
don't
know?
have to chase it.
Right.
And then it just becomes like a normal thing, and that like took away that aspect of my substance use, where like that relationship with that substance is not the same. Like it's a
And even if you
different
get past
thing.
that, and if you develop some sort of abusive relationship with a drug like that, like the way the healthcare system is set up is just different here than it is. I know in Europe, there's countries where like if you are addicted to whatever, like heroin or whatever, like you'll check into the hospital. Like they'll put you in the hospital. You know, here it's like there's these weird rehabilitation clinics that some people say they're more like a jail than a hospital, and some people say it's like a country club. Like it's a very
Depends
weird.
on how much money you have.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like it
And your
should be equal
insurance.
for everyone. It should be like, well, it's not like people who have more money heal in this way. Like
Right.
everyone should be able to heal in the same way. And so the whole rehab system in the U.S. is like,
Well, I feel like that's our entire medical industry.
It is.
Like you go to the hospital, if you don't have insurance, they don't care. Like, okay, here's
Rub some
two
dirt on
pills.
it.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
it's a
You know,
for-profit industry.
Yeah.
Medicine is
I
for-profit
had
in the U.S.
I had an injury. I train MMA and jiu-jitsu, and I injured my leg. And I don't go to the hospital for anything, but this one I was like, this
Had to
is
go.
a lot. This is very painful.
Yeah.
And I knew they weren't going to do anything for me because I don't have insurance. And sure enough, I'm telling them my knee swelled up, but the pain was up in my hip. I damaged my IT band, and so with gravity, the swelling went to my knee. And I was telling them the pain is in my hip. You know, it's higher up.
Right.
Oh, well, your knee's swollen, so we're gonna X-ray your knee. It's like that's not where the pain is. You know,
$300 out the window. You know.
more than 300.
More than
You
three-
see
yeah.
the bill I got.
Oh my God.
They gave me a shot of tramadol and a steroid and sent me on my way. I'm like, I need more than that. You know, I need like an MRI or something. Like something's hurting. You know, I didn't break anything, but something's wrong. And
If you had more money, it wouldn't. Be
Yeah.
Oh,
like
if
would
you had
be-
you know, they
insurance,
said-
dude, they put you every
Yeah.
test they could.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yep.
like,
And I'm trying to
anything
tell
they
them
could
like
bill for.
the pain is up here. There's nothing wrong with my knee. No,
We're going to
your
milk you.
knee's swollen. So we're gonna.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
I think that definitely contributes to the problem, is like how healthcare works in terms of like access to care. And, you know, it's like a weird thing with like the for-profit healthcare system mixed with these weird societal views on drug use and drug abusers is like, well, let's treat these people like pieces of shit unless they have a bunch of money.
yeah.
And so it
absolutely.
creates two different sort of groups of people who, you know, they're able to get over it and they have a great life and they can move on. And then people that are like, you're stuck in the system because you've fallen through these cracks. It's like, it's so evil. Like I've, you know, grown up in South Florida, like it's hard to not, that's probably part of my exposure to like drug use and what happens to people. Cause it's like half the people you meet around Palm Beach County, like young people around my age is like, well, I ended up here. I'm from up north. I'm from somewhere else. It's like, oh, why'd you move here? It's like, I went to rehab. It's like, okay, you know. And some people don't seem any better off than they did when they probably got here, you know. And that's not to the chagrin of those rehabs. They're like, come on back, you're a repeat customer. Like, they love that shit, you know?
Well, a lot of them come down here because they're forced by their parents or something.
Right.
A lot of them don't have the desire to actually
Exactly.
make a change, so they come down here and they.
Well, it's a legal thing, too, where it's like, well, you broke the law, so the law is forcing you to do something
Yeah.
that... It's like forcing someone to believe in a religion. It's like, it's not going to happen if it's not going to happen. You have to. It has to come from within yourself, you know? And so, yeah.
But it's definitely here, especially here in South Florida. It's a huge business, man.
Yep.
It's a huge business, and if you don't have good insurance and you don't have the money to pay for it, you end up in a state-run facility.
And they're
and
not.
those are the stories that you hear that are like a prison.
Yep.
You know, because those state-run facilities are tough.
Yeah.
They're
I
not,
had a
they're
friend.
not cushy at all.
I had a friend who went, like Josh, who went and he's like, yeah, they took away my books. It's like, why can't you read books? Like, what do you think? I'm hiding drugs in them? Like, they're just books. Like, what the fuck? Like, that's some other level shit of like, you just want to torture people.
And some of them are like doubled up. Some of them are like a mental facility and a rehab. So you're in there with some crazies
Great.
trying to get clean.
Doesn't that help everyone involved?
Yeah, like, you know what I mean? You got some dude screaming at nobody in the next room and you're over here withdrawing. Yeah, all right, I'm checking out. I got to go.
Yeah,
Not making things any easier for
my
you.
first night in detox, because I went to detox in a hospital, a Vanderbilt hospital in Nashville. Because like my only options, as my insurance was Medicare, my only options were like a few of the state-run facilities down here that I knew about. And as far as like the state-run stuff goes, like it can be done right, but like, and the facility part is one thing. Like when sometimes like there'll be a place like where the facilities are shitty and like and by like the environment within, like the rooms, the fucking like the bathroom, whatever, and like they'll redo the facilities. But like what makes a place not great is like it's the people and the way they're treating the people that come in.
If you're still in a society that views these people as less than human, it's like you can make it the nicest looking facility in the world, and it's still going to be like, you piece of shit, like you suck.
Right.
There's something wrong with you. Like
And
that's not going to help out a person.
They treat them terribly. I mean, if
probably
the
get
staff
callous.
doesn't want to be there.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of places around the country and in Palm Beach County, like they're staffed. They're not staffed with like techs who like are there because they want to be there. They're staffed with like local people in the neighborhood who like, you know, in some cases may have just sold crack to the patient last week.
Right.
Like literally,
It's a weird
I know
culture
of,
down here,
like,
yeah.
things that have happened like that around.
Like that's the story that I've heard like with groups of friends, and it's like, oh, we're going to get drugs. It's like you go to an area that has a lot of rehabs and halfway houses. It's like that's where you can find drugs.
Yeah.
You know,
Dude, I worked for a facility. It was my first and only job in treatment. I think I had about a year into my recovery, and I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to help people, you know? So I got this job, and I'm pretty sure it was a PHP IOP, so they had like a house,
Yeah.
and then they would take them to a facility for
Right.
the
Yeah.
PHP and IOP. But I am pretty damn sure that one of the guys that was like the owner of the house, or not the house, but of the company, sold coke. I heard him on his phone talking
Yeah.
about White Girl
I've
a few
heard,
times.
Yep, that's the code word.
Uh-huh.
Stories
That white
like
girl was
that.
good, wasn't she? You know, I remember hearing. And we're outside of the facility where they would take them for their classes and stuff. And I'm like, did he just say what I think he said?
It's a weird culture down here, you know.
He'd pull up and open his car door, and all you'd smell is weed. Like, you know.
I mean, again, there's the dude, fucking like pill mills were popping. They get shut down. A lot of the same people who were investing in that shit invested in treatment, dude. Like at the end of the day, just like the healthcare, that was for profit.
Right.
And like people made a lot of money in a lot of like
Oh, yeah.
really shitty ways that put lives in jeopardy and literally ended lives many times over
Yeah.
around here.
Well, these guys were definitely in it for the profit.
Yeah.
You know, they weren't doing it because they cared. They were doing it because they wanted to capitalize on other people's misery, for sure,
Yeah.
without a doubt.
And
And
it's a-
they didn't even last a year. Right, they get
They get
I was
shut
there.
down.
Yeah, well, they didn't get shut down. They ended up closing the doors. People were quitting. They didn't have the employees to run it. I was one of the last ones there. The guy that was supposed to relieve me didn't show up because he quit.
You're like, I'm
And then then I made the phone call and I told my boss, I'm like, look, I'm gonna finish this out, but I can't keep doing this. 5 minutes later, I get a phone call back saying, hey, tell everybody to pack up. We're shutting the doors. Just like that.
You're like, so I was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Pretty much, man. So yeah, I had to
crazy.
tell everybody, pack up, man. We're locking the doors. They have another facility for you. I worked it out with another place and transfer them over there. Some of them were like, nah, I'm good. And they went on their way. And, yeah.
I'm good. I'm sure you are.
Yeah. No.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, that's how how capitalist society is. It's like there's a lot of products that could stand to be like, if you want to open a cookie store, you're just by virtue of you can make more money with the best cookie possible. It's like you're going to come up with some pretty kick-ass, awesome cookie ideas and create a product that everyone loves. But like healthcare and like treatment is not the same thing as that. It's like it doesn't seem to work out that way where you create the best form of treatment for people. You're just, what's the way I can make the most money out of these people?
Yeah. And then I get people in the house relapsing, but they won't kick them out because they don't want to lose that money.
It's a cash cow, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, what are you going to do?
They have good insurance and they keep getting the insurance money, you know?
And as far, like, I don't know, sometimes the people that need the quality treatment the most, not saying that one needs more than the other, but those are the ones that are going to the state-funded facilities that are treating them like shit,
Yeah.
Like I was going to say, my first night in detox at that hospital, they put me in, they didn't have beds in the detox unit, so they put me in the psychosis unit. Like, and
Great.
because they needed to get me out there, I was like going to start seizing from benzo withdrawal. It was like this whole thing. But in the morning, dude, like when I got up, there was not a single person on that unit that I could talk to. Everybody was either like catatonic or talking to themselves, yelling at a non-existent person about Jesus. Like, it was a wild experience. And I'm like in the midst of being really sick, and like benzo withdrawal will start to make you feel like your mind is fizzling away, or on fire. Like, it's not a good experience
Get me
in
the
general.
fuck out of here.
Like, and there needs to be treatment for people in those situations too. But like, I was supposed to see like a neurologist, because that's why I went to fucking Vanderbilt, dude. Like, my sister lived outside of Nashville. I knew that as a hospital system, like, they're a good hospital. Yeah. They have a lot of specialists. I was thinking maybe I could get detox and then speak with a neurologist about trigeminal neuralgia. I was supposed to see a dermatologist for like this whole other thing. And I was there 2.5 weeks because like my detox was gnarly, and no specialist came by. I was supposed to see a psychologist / therapist about shit, and like they didn't come by. And at one point I asked a nurse, the nurses were great at this particular place, like they cared. But I asked them, I was like, hey, like, isn't like a neurologist or any of these people supposed to come? And she's like, it's on your chart. She's like, I'll be honest with you, they're probably not going to. She's like, they don't pay much attention to this unit. Right. This unit doesn't get, and like,
lack of empathy.
That's the fucking thing. Yeah, like, I asked, they made me feel like really dumb and like spoiled when I asked for like, I was fucking shaking and freezing before they could get me up to any unit, before I got to the psychosis unit. I like asked them, I was like, do you guys have a blanket warmer? Because any hospital I've ever been to like has a fucking blanket warmer. Yeah. They laughed. Like, they laughed at me and they're like, yeah, like, what do you think this is? I'm like, Vanderbilt Hospital. Like, I thought I was
what
going
it
to
is,
fucking
is
hospital. Like, not here. Like, that's the way we treat fucking people who need help for substances, and like, that's
great.
Like, still, because it's viewed as like some thing about your character. It's a moral failing. Like, either way, even if like we say we don't take that approach anymore in terms of how we implement protocols and medical treatment, but as far as like how it's carried out, like that's still the fucking
Yeah.
like the mindset and the approach that underlies it, I guess.
I forget what I was saying about someone recently. It was like some elected official or someone talking shit about people who use drugs. And I was like, you know what? Someone should kidnap them and force feed them narcotics for a month and then just throw them on the street and see how they react. If it's like you're just inherently a bad person, or is it like your body's reacting to something that it's become used to for whatever variety of factors. It's like, it doesn't make you any worse of a person. Like, that's disgusting to say.
Dude, when it fucking comes to politicians and people in power who make decisions, it only ever comes down to whether or not it affects them.
Yeah.
Like on both sides, they'll act like that towards people who use drugs until somebody in their family or somebody they love has a problem, and then they have compassion. Or so flower, when the medical program in Florida first started, there wasn't flower, right?
I remember.
Shortly after flower got legalized, there started to be like DeSantis and some of the other politicians in the Florida House and Senate were trying to push laws, a few legislative sessions in a row, to limit THC levels to 10%.
Yeah.
And I never, some were like just with flower, some said like across the board, like cartridges, like it was fucking crazy and baseless,
Right.
So what? People are just going to smoke more.
It was like, we don't want
that's
people to
not
have fun.
healthy. Like, initially, we don't want flower because we don't want to endorse for a medical thing
Right.
combustible smoking, because that's like not good for you. But now we're going to limit THC percentages, knowing that people are just going to fucking smoke more, like to get the same amount. Like, the logic isn't there. That was like 2 or 3 legislative sessions where it was like it got pretty far, the bill to limit it, never ended up passing. It hasn't been brought up again in like 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Any idea why?
Because it was baseless.
DeSantis' wife got breast cancer or some kind. I think it was breast cancer, some kind of
That's
cancer.
right, yeah.
DeSantis' wife got her medical card.
And so it was like, well, let's afford all the privileges to these people because there's someone who.
Well, he had
Who it affects.
he saw like he had a personal relationship with somebody that he cared about
Right.
that would have been affected
Absolutely
by
no
passing
empathy.
this law, and that was benefiting from cannabis that was higher than 10%.
Right.
So now we're not going to talk about that anymore. Like that's just how that goes, like across the board.
Not the way a leader should be. It's like, well, once it
Yeah.
affects me is when I will. It's like there's a lot of Florida's a huge state. Like there's a lot of people here. Like it's not going to reflect your experience everywhere.
Right.
So
Right.
that's horrible. I mean, like, I had a friend who died from narcotics use. I've had to buy drugs from a literal fucking rapist before.
Jeez.
I've done drugs in public places and like weird like spaces where you're really not supposed to, within a 50, 100 feet of a school zone, near little kids. There's like all these horrible things that I've seen that are like, if we viewed drugs in a different way as a society, like it probably all wouldn't have happened the way that it did. It's just like been put into this box of like, you are these other people,
Right.
and so.
Well, it makes drugs more harmful. Like that's in simplest, most reductionist terms. Like the approach we've taken has made substance use all the worse on people who choose to use drugs, which are a lot of fucking people.
Right. And there's a lot of people I know who use drugs regularly, and they're like, I'm fine, like I'm doing okay. There is a middle ground. Like you can use some of these drugs recreationally on a regular basis or come on and off, and it's like you don't deserve to get thrown in jail or
Right.
whatever. Like that is the one way that maybe it will permanently fuck your life up, is like if you get busted, depending on what the circumstances are, like your life may be ruined, just because you
Which
use
again
drugs.
has nothing to do with drug.
Exactly.
Like it's a fucking that's the society and the policies
Exactly.
around it. Yeah.
So if we change the way that things were, maybe the world would be a little bit better.
Yeah.
But,
So before we wrap up, I have 2 questions. One, what do you feel the Delta 8 is doing for you?
Yeah, okay.
And 2, how have things changed in the 7 or 8 weeks since you've stopped smoking?
So we didn't even talk about that, yeah. So the Delta 8 has been okay. It's been great to help satisfy that ritual urge of like, you put it in a grinder, you grind it up, you sit down, I'm watching a movie, I'm listening to a record or whatever, and this is something that I just do. I just have that, like, she knows me to be like, you're sitting at home, like, you've always got that bong in your hand. It's just like a standard, like, that's just like a reflex. And so it's helped in that way, and also to help me realize, like, I did have such a high tolerance because started smoking this stuff, my tolerance has gotten lower, and it has gotten to the point where it's like, whoa, this stuff is sort of starting to get me a little bit high sometimes if I smoke a ton of it. Like, and it's like 0.3%, less than 0.3 is what it says on the thing, which is like, that's
less
ridiculous.
than 0.3, I think, of Delta 9, but then the Delta 8 is like, so the Delta 8 products,
Yeah.
like, it's not, some of them are like marketed in a way
It might be
that,
like a name brand.
that leads you to believe
Yeah.
that it's grown with a higher level of Delta 8 THC that's
Right.
naturally occurring. What Delta 8 products are CBD flower, like hemp flower,
Right.
that's legal to sell, which has to be 0.3% or less of Delta 9 THC, with Delta 8 THC sprayed onto it. Delta 8 THC doesn't like necessarily like occur naturally. The
Yeah.
way that it's made is through like reversing the natural degradation
Right.
process.
We talked about this, yeah.
So THCA, which is THC acid, dissolve or degrades into THC, which is what. So when you smoke, when you combust flower, you're turning THCA into THC and making it absorbable, right? Same reason like you fucking when you heat up to decarboxylate
Yeah.
for edibles, you're turning THCA into THC.
Right.
THC degrades to CBD. With the CBD in the hemp flower or wherever they're getting the CBD, there's a process. I'm not that familiar with the process.
Yeah.
There's a process of reverting the CBD back to THC with one less carbon bond, which is Delta 8 THC.
Oh, okay.
So like there is a processing,
Yeah.
and then they then put that on hemp flower.
Yeah. And so by that degree, it's like, great, I'm now using this thing that's like, God knows where the fuck it came from, some weird
and
lab
like
process.
I don't know enough about the process to
Yeah.
say like that it's like negative or sketchy. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just know like they never say outright, but they kind of imply. I've been led to believe through like some marketing and stuff that like, oh, this was shit that was grown with a higher level of Delta 8 THC,
But not necessarily,
Delta 9.
yeah.
That's not like really what it is. But I don't know. I think it's a good idea. Like I would do the same thing.
There
like,
was
if
no way I
was
could go
trying to-
cold turkey
yeah.
on this shit. Like,
Yeah.
it was like a part of every part of my life, you know?
Right.
It's like I couldn't just
Right.
stop. If I stopped, I would be going insane, you
Right.
know? So that's been good, and it's been like 8 weeks now, something like that. And so it's been all right to help me with, like, keeping somewhat of an appetite and helping me get to sleep at night. And I've sort of dialed back in terms of, like, when I'm using it. Like, that's definitely changed a lot. Like, doesn't happen during the day, doesn't happen at lunchtime at work. Now that I'm working from home, like, that was probably another thing where it's like, I could just smoke weed whenever I wanted. And so that has definitely changed things around a little bit in terms of, like, when is an appropriate time to use it. It's changed my outlook on, like, when should I do this?
Right.
And so it's been helpful in that way, but like, I don't know, it does a little something, I guess. Like the CBD is probably the thing that I'm feeling the most of, like, it's keeping me relaxed.
Yeah.
It doesn't have me on edge all the time.
I was thinking about it the other day because I asked Tess like,
Yeah.
if you were like what the plan was, like if you were gonna go like from the Delta 8 to the like just CBD flower.
Probably, yeah.
Might be a good idea, but
Yeah.
I was thinking like there's probably some like utility to the Delta 8 too, in that it's not as rewarding. Like not
Yes.
just the effect,
Exactly.
but I've hit it like over at y'all's place.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't taste very good.
Yeah.
Like so it's almost like
It's not the same.
yes. There's gonna be an increasingly decreasing desire
Yeah.
for
diminishing
it,
returns
so it's easier
of like
to do it
what's-
less often.
it's not doing anything for me in that
Right.
way, and it doesn't remind me of
Right.
cannabis in the way that I thought it would. So
Right.
yeah, it's like it's not as fun
Still
for
get
sure.
the process.
Yeah,
but-
so I am thinking of shifting to that CBD flower at some point. 'Cause
Yeah.
I know they sell it at the same place that I get the stuff, but it's weird. Like this fucked up. Like if everyone remembers the days of like the K2 and the Mr. Nice Guy and that crap,
Mm-hmm.
it's like what the fuck am I smoking here? You know, but it hasn't given me the same reaction that stuff did.
Yeah, no, that
was
shit's
like
crazy.
weird, but it's been okay. Like it's kept things sort of like a little bit normal in terms of my routine, but also like a huge change, like mentally wise, in terms of like not being high every moment of every day. Like it's been a lot different. Like I find myself caring a little bit more about work, thinking about the future. Doing stuff together, going out with friends and doing
feel
stuff.
like you're more
like,
social.
yeah, like I played in a band for 6 years, stopped doing that a few years ago, and like recently I've been like, like I got to do something. And so one of my friends like reached out, was like, hey, you want to jam sometime? And so I came back and we started doing that. Like it's a weekly thing now, and it's exciting. Like it's given me that urge to want to like put things in my life that I get excited about, because it's not just like, well, I could just smoke weed all the time, whatever. Like
Right.
I'm doing great. Like this is fun. It's fun to just get really high and fantasize about what could be, like I was in that space for so many years of like, I could just smoke weed all the time and think about all the cool music projects I can do instead of actually going out and doing them. And so it's been nice in that regard, and like having a good time going out with friends and develop a healthy relationship with alcohol because of my family history and what that's been like, and
Right.
being able to just go out and have one drink and maybe not even really enjoy it that much, but still being like, hey, I'm doing it socially with everyone else. So that's nice, to not have that crutch of being stuck on this thing of like, yeah, so when are we going to go so I can go and smoke weed,
Right.
I hated being like that. So it's nice to be feel like more of a part of society in that way.
Hell yeah.
It's been good.
Nice.
Future's bright for me, so thank you.
It's dope, man. I'm glad. I feel like it's a big step, and I feel like that's like a positive step. for
It's
you,
the kind of thing
for
where it's like there
sure.
was nothing, no legal thing, no doctor, no anyone
Right.
telling me like you need to stop this or else something's bad's gonna happen. It's like I just had to figure out like I gotta stop this. So
Right.
it's been hard because I could go back at any point and pretty much everyone in my life would be like, whatever, that's fine, like
Yeah.
cool.
mean,
So
and-
it's good to have that support.
Right. And maybe like I don't know. I wanna. So yeah, like it's easy with cannabis, and like we said, like like I've had problematic cannabis use and did the same shit. Like just didn't fucking do anything. Like
Yeah.
so yeah, it can certainly have a negative effect on motivation and stuff.
Oh, yeah,
like
absolutely.
anything else, dude. Like you fucking use a hammer to build a house, or you can use a hammer to fucking beat yourself over the head. Like
For real.
there's it's either a tool or it can be detrimental, and like depending on where you're at in your life and how it's being used, the intention behind it, is just going to impact like how it impacts you. Like I don't know, like I'll go through periods where like I'll not smoke for like a week and like not realize that
Wow.
I didn't. And it's been a few months since like I've gone through one of those periods,
Yeah.
and it like will ebb and flow. But like I'll have to, from time to time, I've never have felt like in my recovery my cannabis use has been problematic. But
Well, because you've
I'll
had experience
still-
with a different drug and being like, well, this is a problematic
Right.
usage. So
Right.
you can compare it in that
right.
way.
But it's still worth like keeping in check and like, making sure. So like here's an example. Like for fucking 2 years, like I was real regimented with like my exercise and like workout routine. When I got COVID in October, like that really fucking like messed me up. Took all of that like away and it was really hard to get back to, and then I'd like get back into it a little bit and then not, and then I had like changes in my life. And when I worked out, like I just didn't smoke weed before I worked out because I knew like it made workouts less effective.
Yeah.
Like even if I had the energy,
Yeah.
like if you don't know this at home, folks, and you think working out on weed is effective because you're not sore the next day, the reason you're not sore is because THC makes your muscles more elastic.
Stretchy, yeah.
So you're not getting the fucking hypertrophy and
You're getting
breaking
ripped.
down of your muscles, which is what builds more muscles. It's just stretching them. So that's why you're not sore.
And it's also more rewarding, you know. You smoke weed after you're done. Give yourself a
Exactly.
little treat.
Yeah. But you know, like I would never really smoke weed before a workout or like before kind of like the end of the day. Maybe I would like hit a cart here and there. But if my workout routine will go by the wayside, I might find myself smoking weed more. Or if like there's some shitty situation in my life, like I might find myself smoking more. It's still like something that like anybody with anything like need to just keep in check and
Yeah.
like pay attention to.
With
Just
any
like
drug,
your fucking diet,
you have to
with
be
sugar.
mindful.
Am I like
Like
just fucking
it's a thing that you're altering your mind with, and it's like it's not something to be done like passively. It's like remind yourself, like I am altering my mind right now. Like there is a right time to do that for sure, but there's also times where it's like, is this the best decision? Maybe I should be more lucid for this, and you know, put that down for a little bit. So like, it's definitely a tool to be used or misused.
time and place and all that good shit.
Yeah.
And dose.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Don't fucking eat 75 milligrams of THC because it's Tuesday.
Yeah.
It's not going to be
I
a good
did that
time.
last time I went to San Francisco, and like my horrible relationship with edibles, it didn't really do much for me.
Yeah, true.
So.
Yeah. Dude, gut health. Bro.
I know that's a different topic for a different day, right?
Edibles didn't work for me for years until I got that shit straight. And then 10 milligrams, I was ripped.
That's crazy.
But yeah, gut health is a big one. Well, dude, I appreciate it. I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
Yeah, man.
I really appreciate it.
Congrats.
Thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to, you know, like legitimize my story or whatever, and be like, you know, share it with people, because, you know, I hope anyone out there is listening and watching. Like, you can do it. Like, you can make your life better, and whether you're doing drugs or not, like, it's okay. Things are gonna get better, and there's a way past it. You know?
Beautiful.
Thank you.
I like it.
We appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, fellas. I
Thanks,
appreciate
guys.
it.
All right.
Sweet. Until next time.
Yeah, buddy.
Open up!